Museum of the Moving Image. I'm Barbara Miller, the Director of Curatorial Affairs. And I'm welcoming you instead of our Executive Director, Carl Goodman, who unfortunately is ill and can't be with us today. But just very, very excited to have this day upon us, where we are opening Envisioning 2001, Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey, here at Museum of the Moving Image. It's been a long voyage for us. We've been aware of the touring exhibition, the Stanley Kubrick exhibition that the Deutsches FilmInstitut Filmmuseum put together in the early 2000s, and we've been very jealous of our colleague institutions that have had the space to host it in places all over the world, and I've seen it myself in Los Angeles and in London. But we just unfortunately simply didn't have the space for the entire exhibition, although we dreamt big about having it here. But it was our great good luck that on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of 2001, A Space Odyssey, the release of the film in 1968, that the DFF decided to take a portion of that larger exhibition and sort of amplify it a bit and install it in their beautiful institution in Frankfurt. As an exhibition devoted to 2001. So once they did that, the stage was set for us to take that portion of the exhibition on and install it here at the museum. So it really is something that we've been aiming to do for a long time, and we're very excited that the day is upon us. 2001: A Space Odyssey was the very first film screened in this theater when we reopened our expanded facility in 2011. The architect of this building, Thomas Laser, was inspired by the film, and if you see our lobby, you can sort of, and the theater itself, you can imagine that he was very inspired by the film. So it's a long and sort of intimate history, and we're really excited to have the exhibition here and to be able to collaborate with the DFF and our longtime friend, Ellen Harrington, who is the director of DFF. So it just all came together, and we're really excited to have you here for it. Before I turn the microphone over to Ellen Harrington for a few moments, I just want to acknowledge some of the staff that has worked so hard on putting this exhibition together. Tim Hepner, also from the DFF, who is the exhibition tour manager, goes all over the world with the Stanley Kubrick exhibition and has been here with us, putting the exhibition together here at MoMI. And Wendell Wonker, MoMI's Deputy Director for Operations, Exhibitions, and Design, who just sort of molded the exhibition to our space and put his inimitable stamp on it. And sort of just a word about that. I would say the larger Kubrick exhibition, and also this one is it's sort of like a model kit. It's almost like Legos, right? You open it, and there's things you can make with it, and all the parts are there. But each institution's, like each child's creativity, kind of molds it to fit their own set of expression. And I think that that's a really wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful gift that the DFF has given to us to sort of have all the pieces in place and all of the research there, and the sort of general outlines of what the story that the exhibition tells, but to be able to allow each institution and our institution to be able to shape the story that fits them, and that's what we've done here, and working very closely with Wendell to make that happen, and MoMI's curator at large, David Schwartz, was consulting curator with us and wrote a lot of the exhibition text. So we sort of took that Lego kit and turned it into something here. So I'd really like to acknowledge Wendell's work on that, and also his team, Pat Alvarado, tireless Pat, and the graphics producer, Angel Ortiz, our registrars, Jeanette Pinson, and Jeanette Reichel and Anna Goss, and also Eric Hynes, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes, who's our curator of film, who will talk to you a little bit about the programs that we've put together for the exhibition. Let's see, what else? We would like to thank very much our sponsors, the people that helped make this possible. I want to really acknowledge, and I'm sure Ellen will as well, Warner Brothers for being very generous with the sort of allowing us to show the film so many times, and for allowing really kind of unfettered access to whatever film clips we wanted to show in the exhibition, and we show a lot of them. So thanks very much to Warner Brothers, to London-based Film and Furniture, to the George Lucas Family Foundation, to Active Image, who generously provided the digital canvases on which a lot of the moving image content is displayed upstairs, and the Collective Paper Factory, which is a hotel up the street that's been very supportive to us as well. I think also it's important, and I know Ellen will do this as well, to acknowledge the support not only of the DFF, but through them the estate of Stanley Kubrick, the family, and sort of everyone that is entrusted with making sure his legacy is intact, and sort of making sure the stories told are correct, and allowing current generations and future generations to be exposed to the great work and the storytelling that goes along with it. So without ado, I'll bring up Ellen, and then we'll talk a little bit more with Tomoko Kawamoto, our Director of Public Information, and we'll talk to me and to Katharina Kubrick, who we have here today, which is very exciting. But for now, I'll turn it to Ellen. So Ellen Harrington.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's really fun for me to be back. I'm now in Frankfurt, Germany, running the Deutsches FilmInstitut and Filmmuseum, but I previously was at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and we did some great collaborations with the team here, so it's fun to be back in the house. Barbara and Wendell and David Schwartz and Carl Goodman, this team has been so welcoming to us in bringing this exhibition. And for us, it was really important to try to have Stanley Kubrick represented and recognized in New York. This is where he's from. The neighboring borough of the Bronx, of course, is where he grew up. A lot of his early work was accomplished here as a photographer and as an emerging filmmaker. The conversations with Arthur C. Clarke that happened around the development of 2001 happened in Manhattan when the family was living here. And you can really see in the exhibition the dialogue that happened around this city. So for us to be back home here is fantastic. The exhibition, the larger exhibition that Barbara referenced, the Stanley Kubrick touring show, has now been in 19 venues around the world. It has been seen by 1.8 million people. So this is a pretty remarkable statistic, and we think that a lot of New Yorkers will be very interested in coming out and seeing this collection. We're very honored to always be working with the Stanley Kubrick estate, represented today by Jonathan Cameron, who's here, and of course the family. Katharina Kubrick is here with us. Very often her uncle, Jan Harlan, who was a producer in Stanley's team, and his brother-in-law is often with us, and unfortunately he's in London and not able to join us today, but I do want to acknowledge him as a driving force to try to make sure that this exhibition comes to New York. Another interesting New York fact that Tim Hepner told me is that there was a warehouse in New York where the test footage was done for the Stargate sequence. So there's so many tie-ins to this film and this city. The programming also that you'll have the advantage of having here in New York over the next 6 months is really rich and varied. We did a lot of this type of exploration when we hosted the exhibition in Frankfurt last year for the 50th anniversary. You can talk about Kubrick, you can talk about filmmaking, design, science fiction, technology, artificial intelligence, the future of our planet, the future of space travel. There are tremendous film programs looking at the influence on Stanley Kubrick of different earlier science fiction films and the films that came out of the work that he did. So it's a really rich program, and we're honored to, again, be here with these long-term partners, and we hope, given that we have an exhibition space in Frankfurt that's quite similar in size, we think that over the years we can develop some projects together and be here more often and have some of the content that's created here delivered over to Europe. So looking forward to all of that, and thank you again for being here this morning.
Hi, I'm Tomoko. I just want to bring Barbara back on stage and also introduce Katharina Kubrick, our special guest for today, and also the rest of this week. So please come on stage now. this up to questions from members of the press, but to start things off, I wanted to just ask a few questions to get things rolling. So for Katharina, New York was once home for you and your family. How does it feel to have this exhibition arrive in your father's hometown?
It's not before time, actually. As Barbara said, it's been to 19 cities. London was the last one, and we had 166,000 visitors at the Design Museum, and that was the whole exhibition. And it would be lovely if a space could be found in Stanley's hometown. He was a New Yorker to the very end, Bronx boy, and he loved New York. He had regular DVDs and videos of football games and baseball games sent to him by his sister, and he kept in touch and got New York and American newspapers. So he was always in touch with what was happening here. And this is obviously pre-Google and pre-YouTube and so on. But he would be thrilled that this was here, definitely.
Bring the volume up a little bit more. I don't think it's your control.
There's no.
No, it's not very loud. That's
Maybe turn the mics up just a
Yeah,
little
we
bit.
can turn the mics up a little bit.
Technology,
Okay, Barbara, I'll turn it over to you. Can you tell us about the role New York played in the making of 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I would say it was sort of a starring role, actually, from the research perspective. The work on the film started in New York, right? So Stanley and his family were living here, and it was while in New York that Stanley reached out to Arthur C. Clarke to sort of start talking about the idea of the film. He was talking with Roger Karras, who had worked in PR for a long time and then went on to be the vice president of Stanley's production company. So this sort of idea for this new kind of science fiction film took root in Stanley's head while he was living in New York, reached out to Arthur C. Clarke, started a correspondence with him, and then their work on the film began in earnest in New York in May of 1964, and over the next year, the story was developed here. So it was working with Arthur, who would come back and forth from Sri Lanka to New York and sort of hole up in the Chelsea Hotel while Stanley was working either at home with the family or in the production offices on Central Park West. So it was their sort of collaboration, and the development of the story was here in New York. And also, sort of importantly, Stanley was exposed to the sort of the cinema scene that was happening in New York. He was able to see films like Jordan Belsen's Allures. He was sort of exposed to all that was sort of around him. And among the films that he was exposed to in New York was one that screened at the New York World's Fair, 1964-65 World's Fair, a film called To the Moon and Beyond, that was made by sort of a small LA-based production company called Graphic Films. And Stanley was so impressed with the depictions of space in that film. It was a company that typically made films for NASA, the Jet Propulsion Lab, and the Air Force, and they were really, it was a very, very different kind of approach to space filmmaking than the Hollywood movie science fiction film. So he reached out to them to make some concept art for 2001, which was still, sort of coming together. And they did, and sort of the longer story is sort of long, but the short version is that that Con Pedersen and Doug Trumbull worked for Graphic Films and were sort of lured away to work with Stanley directly on the film in London shortly thereafter. So all of that work happened in New York, or in that first year, and by the time they moved to London, they were sort of gearing up for production. So I would say it was in a lot of ways a very sort of New York-based story, the production of 2001, or certainly the development.
Actually, I think we were living in Lexington. Lexington Avenue, not Central Park West.
I think the office was Central Park West, and you're
so we were living on Lexington, 84th Street.
Katharina, can you, once production started on the film, you and your whole family moved to England. What was it like as a child to witness the film coming into being? Are there any stories you want to share about that period?
Okay, well, we came to London in 1964. We were living in a hotel for a few weeks, as I recall, and Stanley was having meetings. Eventually found a house to rent in Boreham Wood, and MGM Studios is where he made the film. And we would, we were children, so we would visit the set, and as things progressed, we would visit more often, and I would walk on the centrifuge or cuddle the chimpanzees or go into the art department. And the art department for 2001 was like a massive art college. Everybody was experimenting and having a whale of a time, and Stanley was very free-form. He was very experimental. This hadn't been done before. And so you had Doug Trumbull and Con Peterson and the draftsman and Harry Lang and all these guys just given free rein, come up with something that hasn't been seen before. So it was, for me, it was wonderful to go and visit. And Stanley liked living in England. We all went to school. We lived in the countryside. It was quiet. It was not New York. It was certainly not Hollywood, which he was desperate not to be in. And he just liked the life, and he liked the English weather.
Okay, switching gears a bit, seeing 2001 today, more than 50 years after its original release, the film still feels so fresh. What do you attribute that to? Or
Question two to me.
Yeah, both of you.
Because it doesn't tell you what to think. Who you are is how you receive it. And it is a handmade film. And it is very unusual in how it deals with the unknown and the unknowable. And it's Stanley's bow to what is ultimately unknowable. It's incredibly respectful and full of wonder and full of mystery. And he wanted people to, it was an experience. He didn't want to tell you what to think. He would never explain the ending, because once you explain it, then that takes away your imagination and your interpretation. Excuse me. So everybody who sees it sees something different. And certainly when we were in Cannes 2 years ago, and it had the first, red carpet at Cannes for a classic movie, it was amazing, the love for that film in that packed audience, with Christopher Nolan just having worked on the sort of so-called unrestored version and massively geeking out on the whole experience. And when I saw it in Cannes, it was almost as if I was watching it at the Lowe's Theatre in 1968 when I was 14. And us three girls were sitting in the very front row with a packed audience full of old people with, red hair, grey hair and jewellery, and didn't know what the heck was going on. And there were walkouts, and Stanley was at the back of the cinema with his clicker getting more and more depressed. And the three of us were sitting in the front audience going, wow, so this is what Stanley's been doing for the last 4 years. And we loved it. We absolutely loved it. And I think the people who are open to experiencing it and do love it, and young people who are used to endless CGI and not much story and not much really to think about or take away and digest, even they love it. Very young people come up to me and say, wow, I just saw this movie, man, and it's like goat and whatever that. Excuse me. And when I see it, and you see the Stargate sequence, and you know that it's the result of experimenting and paint being dripped in water and filming it in the dead of night and seeing which was the best one, and poor Keir Delay being dangled from a hoist falling through the airlock, and this was and all this sorry, I'm terribly jet lagged. All the rocket ships and spaceships and models and everything, it was all airfix kits being disassembled. It was bits of truck and bits of rocket and bits of plane. And all the art department were there with their paint and glue, having a whale of a time. And the way it was done, and the fact that people are still talking about it, and that there are no strings, you can't see how it's done, and the story is so huge and affects all of us still to this day, is why people are still talking about it. So I don't know what else to say.
That's great. Thank you. Barbara? Yeah, I don't know how much there is to add to that. I think that's really it. It's it's never just one thing, right? I mean, I agree that I think the first answer has to be that it's a magnificent film. It's a beautiful sort of piece of filmmaking, but there's lots of those, right? There's lots of great films. I think you're very right in pointing out that it's this the sort of scale of it and the opportunity to make of it what you will, and not sort of feeding an experience to the audience, but presenting the audience with things to think about. And these are big themes, right? These are very big themes. These are the themes. These are the questions.
Yeah, there's a quote I dug out, Stanley, talking about 2001. It said, if 2001 has stirred your emotions, your subconscious, or your mythical yearnings, then it has succeeded. And I think that's what he was really trying to achieve. They showed it at the Vatican, for instance. And then he also said the most terrifying fact about the universe is not that it is hostile, but that it is indifferent. And that is truly terrifying. And I used to ask him if he thought that there were, civilized worlds out there. And he said there has to be, because how arrogant and how lonely is it to assume that there are not? And it's like a great piece of music or a great painting. You can see it or listen to it or take it in multiple times. And each time, each viewing, each listening will bring something that you hadn't noticed before, which also increases with your age and your education and your own personal development. And you will see things differently as you yourself are more world aware, if that makes sense. And it's not one of those movies that you forget by the time you finish the popcorn. It lasts, like all great art, it lasts, and 50 years I think is a good testament to that.
I think what's great is that what we're talking about is the fact that the movie has sort of persisted in being shown constantly, and people still talking about it and writing about it and sort of pondering it, not just because of the pioneering special effects, right? So there's a lot of writing about what was different in the approach of filmmaking and all that is really, really important. And as you walk through the exhibition, you'll see a lot of that demonstrated, right? A lot of the sort of attention to the special effects, the storyboards, and a lot of the materials that gives insight into the process. But I think the reason why we really are still talking about this film is because of the ideas. That it really, really sort of comes back to that, and that's something that we try to sort of explore in the exhibition, not just to set it up as a walkthrough of remarkable special effects and sort of pulling back the curtain, letting you see all the secrets, but to really sort of understand that the quest at it from the very start was to make as Stanley said, the proverbial really good special effects science fiction movie, but in service of the ideas behind it, which was, is there other life out there? What is the future of humankind? Are we destined to, become the sort of Nietzsche's superhuman? All of these things that he and Arthur C. Clarke were tangling with over the course of a year and then some, right? Even after production began, they were still sort of wrestling with this, really up until the end of production in very, very late 1967, that it was the ideas driving all of those forward, and it was not just effects for effect's sake, and that's why we're here. It was that combination of the ideas, that the effects were sort of in service of this exploration and of this story.
It's also the biggest question is also about our humanity, and if you think about the Dawn of Man sequence and the apes and finding the weapon, and hitting, to use a Clockwork Orange term, toe-tucking each other over the head, we haven't come on any further really. We're still hitting each other over the head, but now it's oil, not water. And soon it may be water as well. And I think there's a theme running through Stanley's films about the fallibility and vanity and still self-delusion of mankind, running through as a theme through all his films, and how we mess up, consistently. But I also find the films incredibly hopeful and 2001, I think, is the ultimate hopeful film, and that no matter how often we mess up, there's going to be something at the end of it, maybe, hopefully, if we don't blow ourselves up first.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to get some questions from the press here. Okay, Brad, go ahead.
Do you want me to do it with a mic or
Here,
no?
I do have a mic.
Sometimes they like to do it that way.
Sorry.
Okay, great. Well, my 12-year-old self dragged my father to see the movie when it first opened in a Cinerama theater, and I had to explain it to him. Well, did your 14-year-old self have to explain it to any of your friends or parents? Because, of course, my father was never going to get this. And then my other question is, what was it? Was there anything that you kept or wanted to keep that now you see in the exhibition that you wish you had kept?
Oh, well, there's lots of things in the exhibition that were mine that I lent to the exhibition, so that's not in this one particularly, but in the larger exhibition, there were some things that I had lent to the exhibition. Much better to be out in the public than in my living room. But when I was 14, I had seen all the sci-fi films with the shiny metallic suits and pointy rockets and things, and that was what it was, a Quatermass experiment. That's what science fiction was, very much a B-genre movie. And so it was an experience, and I was 14, so I wasn't, high. And that day, or the next day, after all the walkouts in the cinema, and then some really, really bad press, really bad reviews. And I just remember lots of adults walking around looking sad and depressed, and newspapers everywhere in our hotel room. And then my mother heard a disc jockey on the radio saying, "You got to see this movie, it's like far out and groovy, man." And I think it was really teenage boys, young men who made that movie. And who didn't have any preconceived ideas. The Blue Rinse Brigade, forget it. What the heck's going on here? And it was young people who made it. And then when they were starting to get stoned, and then the studios re-sold it, if you remember, as the ultimate trip.
Yeah. Right.
Stanley himself didn't believe in sort of being high, because he thought that you're very arrogant if you're high and you don't make good decisions. It's much better to have a clear head. So people ask me, "Hey man, was your dad high when you made this movie?" I go, "Absolutely not." But it was also, as I said, it was also shown at the Vatican. So it's a slow drip effect that this movie has had. Also, all his other films, which always divided the audience when they came out. And the people with open minds and the willingness to experiment and see something different and see something new. I mean, Woody Allen didn't like it when he first saw it. I think it was only on his third or fourth viewing that he said, "Gee, this is a really great film." And then as it became more and more popular and was really successful, then the critics who didn't like it to begin with then revisited it, if you recall, and said, "I was wrong, I was too hasty. Actually, this is dealing with a really big subject." So I personally didn't do any explaining, but of course we were thrilled when the lines were going around the block and the movie was doing really well. So.
Okay, you have another question right here.
Okay. Hi. So I've read that Alex North didn't find out his soundtrack was dropped till pretty much when he saw the movie. And I've always noticed Stanley had this massive attention to detail to music. It's one of his defining characteristics. I'm curious, what led him to make that ultra gutsy decision, to go with the temp music that he had for the film?
I think he knew Alex North before and had worked together with him on another film. And I think Alex North did the score, and I think Stanley thought it was a bit generic, really, and he wanted something different. Stanley loved music, and he listened to music all the time, and he particularly liked waltzes. And when he was editing 2001, he always had waltzes playing in the editing room. And if you think about the film, everything is spinning and whirling and very slow and graceful, and of course a waltz worked perfectly. And he cut it to the music. And if you listen, a lot of the music that he uses, he doesn't cut it. He lets the music play out, and he finds just the perfect piece. So Zarathustra, the opening sequence of 2001, there is not one note cut out of that piece of music, because he gave respect to the music. And I think my Uncle Jan Harlan found it for him. And he already liked the title, Also sprach Zarathustra, which was this huge poetic poem. And I think he felt that because music is terribly important and very emotional, I think a lot of people use music badly. I watched Spartacus recently. I thought the music was appalling and completely overwhelming and in the way of the movie. And Stanley used music to enhance the scene or to be the scene. And also, I think you don't have copyright issues.
Well.
There you go.
Any more questions?
Well,
Oh, well,
I mean, anybody else?
that chat there.
Just in case no one else.
This might be a very silly question, but what was the most memorable memory that you have with while you are on the set with your father?
What, any of the films?
No.
Or just on 2001?
Just this.
Well, we visited a lot because the studio was just down the road from where we lived. So I would go whenever I could get the time off school, or we would go after school, or we'd go on the weekends. So we visited all the time. So walking on the centrifuge, sitting in the pink chairs, as I said, playing with the chimpanzees, visiting the art department. That was our lives. That's what we did. And it didn't seem special, particularly. I mean, it was fun and it was exciting, of course it is. But it didn't seem unusual because that was my life. And somebody asked me the other day which of the films that my father had made before 2001 had I seen. And I was actually too young to see any of them. I hadn't seen Spartacus, hadn't seen Lolita, definitely not. And actually after Clockwork Orange, even though I was in it and on the set and hanging out and playing ball golf for when Dad and Malcolm were playing ping pong, I wasn't allowed to see it until I was 18. So he was a very careful father and made sure that I saw things when I was age appropriate. But being on the set was just part of life, really. And he loved showing us, come and have a look and look at this and look at the rushes, and he wanted us to be involved as a family.
So I guess if there's, I'm sorry, other questions?
Sorry, one quick one.
Yeah.
2001 was, is iconic. My God, there's an exhibit about it here at the museum, so it's pretty important. But for decades it was important, and in our pop culture for so much. I mean, it was parodied by Monty Python. It was on Sesame Street. Elvis used the 2001 music in his concerts. I'm wondering.
David Bowie.
Sure. I mean, it goes on and on.
Simpsons.
What, did your father get a kick out of that? Was he did he keep a record of oh, look at that, Elvis is using it now? Did you find that amusing? Did he ever comment on that?
Oh, of course. I mean, wouldn't you? If somebody an artist who you respected or was taking, because he borrowed too. Stanley was the ultimate film geek and the ultimate student of film. He watched everything, and from a very young man, when he was I think even before he was a photographer at Look magazine, and he would go to the cinema and he would see movies, art house movies at the Museum of Modern Art, and so he was influenced by everybody, and he was incredibly cheeky because he eventually became Stanley Kubrick. He could then call people up and call directors up and see, I love your movie, and pick their brains and say, gee, how did you do that scene? And so somebody was inspired by him, or they did something quirky or amusing. Of course, he was happy. And when 2001 came out, apart from because he kept all the letters, sort of fan or fan or foe, and he got people writing in the most extraordinary, 25-page letters of their take on 2001 and what it meant. And he loved that, and he kept everything. he kept all those letters, and even the ones who said, here's my ticket stubs back, I want my money back. That was a cross, No, I mean, he was very pleased when people responded to his work. I mean, why wouldn't you be? I hope that answers your question, but I don't know.
Okay, one last one.
Okay.
I just want to get an idea. You said this is a smaller version. So what percentage of the original exhibit is here?
Ellen or Tim, is there a percentage that you can say?
Well, the larger touring show is about 12,000 square feet, so that's why we couldn't fit it into the museum here. And it covers all 13 of the feature films that were made by Stanley Kubrick and a lot of biographical material from the estate and the archive. So the entire new exhibition about 2001 is here. Everything that was done.
A little bit more. So
Plus
it's
a little,
like
yes.
The section of the 2001 section of the larger touring show, sort of amplified. Yeah.
But we created this as a standalone exhibition for the 50th anniversary of the film. We showed it at the Deutsches FilmInstitut and Filmmuseum in Frankfurt last summer, and this is the very first tour venue of this new exhibition.
Will the overall exhibition come to the States sometime?
It's been in Los Angeles.
Oh, been in Los Angeles?
How was it? 206,000 people?
260,000 people.
260,000
to Los
people
Angeles
at LACMA. And I personally am desperate for the entire exhibition to come to Stanley's hometown. And, I've been informed that there literally isn't a space big enough to house it, which seems a little bit tragic.
None of the other museums or anything?
No, not.
Not yet. We'll
Go figure.
Yeah.
So maybe if you guys can put something, say, come on, people, let's get the exhibition, the whole exhibition, to New York for Stanley's hometown. I mean, you said the Brooklyn Museum was sort of interested, or is it the Brooklyn Museum sort of? It's somewhere in the whole of New York City.
Not to put any pressure on anybody, but
No.
we've been talking to museums in New York for many years.
Yeah, come on, people, get with it.
We'll start the campaign now.
Well,
Right,
all you have to do is come to MoMI
Let's do it. Go fund me page.
and see what's upstairs, and they'll be inspired to do so.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. We're going to end this portion, but I did want to let you know that we'll have Eric Hynes, our curator of film, talk about the film program. And then after that, you're all welcome to go back in the gallery. And I think we'll have Barbara and Tim lead a tour through.
Great.
Or at least be available for questions.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Katharina. Thank you, Barbara.
We're going to start now.
I don't want to take too much more time because I want to make sure you have enough time to go back into the galleries or go for the first time if you came directly here. But just to say a few words about our film programming, there's never a doubt. The first time we ever even heard about the possibility of this exhibition coming here, there was never a doubt that we were going to do ambitious programming alongside it or in conversation with it, really. Because how could you possibly do an exhibition like this and not show as many films as you possibly can? Because when you see the exhibition, it's clear how many films were used as an influence for the exhibition, how many films, as was mentioned, have been influenced by it, but then also just the conversations that it has suggested in terms of science fiction, in terms of technology, in terms of science, and in terms of Stanley Kubrick himself. So just a few words, which is that we, every year in our See It Big 70mm series, show 2001 on 70mm. It starts off the series every year. It is by far the most popular film we show annually. And so, of course, we're going to be showing the film 2001 Space Odyssey. We have two plans, basically, for showing the film. One is that we're going to be showing it on 70mm monthly. Roughly around the third Sunday of every month with special guests. The first set of guests are pretty impressive. We've got Katharina Kubrick, we've got Thierry Delay, and we've got Dan Richter, all here on stage in conversation with Barbara Miller. And those exhibitions, those screenings will also come with kind of, private access to the exhibition. And we're calling that whole sort of the setup here of the 70mm exhibition access, and our guests the ultimate trip. We are also showing the film every week on Saturday, digitally in this room. I think it's really important for those coming to the exhibition to have an opportunity to see the film in its entirety, either before or after going upstairs to see the exhibition. So that's the opportunity we're going to give for audiences to do that. So in addition to those two ways of doing things around that, when we have special guests, we'll be doing some special lectures and presentations, including on the weekend of, on February 16th or the weekend of February 14th. Piers Bizzoni will be coming here from the UK to deliver an ambitious presentation about the film after the Saturday matinee screening. Followed the next day by Douglas Trumbull, who will be here delivering a special presentation about Star Trek the Motion Picture, and which he did the special effects for, and then that evening he and Piers Bizzoni are going to be in conversation on the stage for the 70mm screening. So that's what our plans are for the next 2 months for 2001, but that also gives you an idea of what's going to be coming down the pike for the screenings of the film. Beyond that, our sort of more terminal series begins this weekend with Influencing the Odyssey, films that inspired Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, programmed by David Schwartz, our curator at large. And that is basically films that had a direct influence on those two principal creators of 2001. That'll be running for 3 weekends, and David will be here presenting a number of those. And in addition to that, another curator we're working with is our Associate Curator of Science and Film, Sonia Epstein, who's doing an ongoing, basically monthly series throughout the exhibition time called Science on Screen, Outer Space Speculators. And each one of those screenings will be introduced by a scientist, the idea being that it's a series that investigates how science has been employed to imagine the future and imagine what outer space might be like, what might be entailed. And so that's going to be ongoing through the end of the exhibition in July. On February 7th, for about 3 months, we are doing our ongoing See It Big program, which is we do several See It Big presentations, and which began when this building was reopened and this room was introduced in 2011. See It Big is basically our way of saying, you need to see these films on the big screen. And it's been a very popular series for us throughout. And See It Big Outer Space is a no-brainer. But that has been organized by myself and Edo Choi, our assistant curator of film. And there's a lot of films in there. But there's not every film in there, obviously. So these are films that, the sort of loose criterion are films that kind of take seriously the notion of outer space, kind of take seriously it's not just sort of wild fantasies, and really actually everything is kind of reality based, or has some sort of basis in plausibility. And so that's that series, and that's going on, and it's everything from Flash Gordon in the early stages through this last year's Ad Astra. And so that's what we've announced. We actually have 3 months of programming announced in advance, which is really good for us. I'm so grateful for an exhibition like this to kind of keep us honest, so we can actually really think further in the future, which I think is appropriate considering the exhibition. But as a preview, David Schwartz is coming back again because of the second half of the programming combined with the exhibition is going to be a full Stanley Kubrick retrospective, including films as well as documentaries and special guests. So that'll be amazing, and we also are going to do some programming about films from 1968. In particular, films that kind of were wrestling with notions of the beyond, and there were quite a few actually. And what else? Afrofuturism series we're going to be doing, taking seriously about envisioning the future. And also some programming that takes on the Jupiter sequence in particular, experimental-wise. And also one last thing, films that are riffing on 2001 directly, which has been mentioned as a concept, so some of those Simpsons references will probably be apparent on the screen as well. Thanks so much for your time. I encourage you to go upstairs and check out. Oh, and there is a press preview of 2001 Space Odyssey this afternoon. What time tomorrow?
1:30.
1:30. So after you've gone upstairs, go out, get lunch, come back, see the film. Thanks, everybody.